This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to the Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. According to U.S. and Taiwan officials, Nancy Pelosi, the U.S. Speaker of the House, will visit Taiwan. And according to Taipei police, the airplane carrying Nancy Pelosi will touch down in Taipei's Songshan Airport at 10 p.m. local time. That is also 10 p.m. Beijing time, which is about 30 minutes from now. Nancy Pelosi would be the highest level American official to visit the island in 25 years. Beijing, of course, sees the trip as provocation and betrayal because Washington promised only unofficial relations with Taiwan when they signed legally binding treaties with China to establish diplomatic relations 40 years ago. Now, Beijing has spoken. China's foreign ministry has warned of severe consequences. Take a listen.
In 1979,
the U.S. government made a clear commitment in the communique on diplomatic ties that the United States of America recognized the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China. As an integral part of government, the U.S. Congress should strictly abide by the country's foreign policy. The Speaker of the House of Representatives traveling to Taiwan on a U.S. military plane is by no means an unofficial act. If the U.S. goes its own way, it will be responsible for all the serious consequences.
Now, to discuss the repercussions of Nancy Pelosi's Taiwan trip, I'm joined in Beijing by Rong Ying, Vice President at China Institute of International Studies, and also in our Beijing studio by Einar Tangen, political and economic affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to the Hub. Dr. Rong Ying, let me go to you first. We've heard from Hua Chunying, Chinese Foreign Ministry's spokesperson. What do you make of it? What could be China's reaction? What could be those consequences that Beijing has warned?
Well, I think the Chinese side has repeatedly said that if the visit would constitute a very serious, grievous provocation and development on the question of Taiwan and for the relationship between China and the United States. And there will be consequences, very grave consequences, and the United States, the U.S. side will bear full responsibilities for these consequences. I think it is really raised a big question that despite the sort of representations, oppositions, not only from the Chinese side, but also from the United States side, you see that the reports, editorials, New York Times and others, a lot of them are asking the question, why? And even in Taiwan, if one follows the interviews, there are quite a lot of people, old and young, they are asking the questions, what's wrong with Taiwan? And why the Taiwan should pay the costs, bear the consequences for Nancy Pelosi? Who is that lady? What is the purpose of that? I think the countries in the region are also asking questions. Why the tensions? Who is going to benefit? Why the region as a whole is going to suffer? Many big questions. All in all, I think that spokesperson, Assistant Minister Wang Guan has made it very clear the United States has to bear the full responsibility for all these things, for the tension.
Yeah, Dr. Rong Ying, we've seen videos of military drills conducted by China's Eastern Command, which is in charge of relations across the Taiwan Straits. We've seen intensified air patrols, and potentially people have been talking about PLA Navy fleets crossing the median line not only, but also coming close to the 12 nautical miles of Taiwan's quote-unquote territories, which of course Beijing considers its own. What would happen militarily tonight?
Well, I'm not able to speculate what would happen militarily.
What would be your best guess?
I would personally hope that there will be nothing happen militarily. After all, I think tension, conflict, war served neither side of interest. But the Chinese side has made it very clear it would have to respond. It would have to do whatever it takes to defend its sovereignty, territorial integrity. And it would have to make clear that when the red lines has been broken, has been touched, and the Chinese side would respond.
Well, the U.S. side has also spoken, Einar. According to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, a few hours ago, Blinken said in an interview, and I quote, "If the speaker does decide to visit and China tries to create some kind of crisis or escalate tensions, that will be entirely on Beijing." What do you make of what Antony Blinken has said?
Well, it's a classic strategy. You blame others for doing exactly what you're doing. If I'm causing a controversy, I can just say, oh, don't cause a controversy. I think it's fairly childish, kind of things that people use on playgrounds and when they were in high school. But I would revisit the point that you were talking about with our other guest, and that is what can be done. I think symbolically, something militarily like crossing the midway line would send enough of a message. The real issue and what America is afraid of is that China would, in essence, take away, remove some of their consulates in the U.S. and possibly put a tariff on any goods going to the United States. With inflation at 9.1%, I think Americans would wonder why they're paying for Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan to grandstand. And it would also send a very, very pointed message to people around in other parts in Europe and England, etc., saying that if you come here, there will be economic consequences at a time when you can least afford them.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be fair if we didn't have a voice from the island of Taiwan. And earlier today, I did have a conversation with Joanna Lei. She was the former legislator in Taipei, and she said it is a blatant attempt, referring to Pelosi's possible trip, to provoke China into a limited small war. Let's take a listen at what Joanna Lei has said.
Well, I think there is no direct, immediate, tangible benefit. However, we shouldn't treat this as an individual blame issue, saying this is Nancy Pelosi's individual behavior, or treat it as a single act. I have continued to believe that this is an act, one of the acts, in a very comprehensive playbook to drag China into what the United States strategists have called a limited small war.
Well, Dr. Rong Ying, what do you make of what Joanna has said?
Well, certainly this is one of the sort of a series or one of the way to interpret this development. And despite, as I said, that there are many ways actually, if the Biden administration itself would really want to stop or would really want to do something to persuade or dissuade Nancy Pelosi. So that's why I think there are many explanations and many ways try to interpret whether it is a kind of a gang up, is a kind of a game, play the bad cop and the good cop way to contain and suppress China, to draw China into a kind of a conflict that China is not ready, but they would have to respond because of it touched upon the various issues, really the core issue of China's core interest. And if that is the case, I think all the countries in the region and in the world should stand up and say no, because we have so many problems. We have ongoing conflict in Ukraine. We have food crisis, energy crisis. We have a lot of crises. Why do we need one more crisis? And this crisis is going to get involved two big powers in the region, neither side, and nuclear powers, neither side is going to win.
I mean, Dr. Rong Ying, this is Washington's double dealing on the question of Taiwan. And really, like you said, playing good cop, bad cop. But after all, this is about political betrayal, to borrow the words of China State Councilor Wang Yi this afternoon, right? If you compare the three communiques against the actions taken by Washington, sending their, or at least having their, one of the most official persons in the land, the second in line for U.S. presidency, to visit the island of Taiwan potentially.
Yeah, definitely. I think if this is another sort of demonstration that United States has gone back its pledges, its commitment, political commitment made to China on the question of Taiwan. And it is also, I think, raised a big question, the question of the credibility of the United States as a nation. If a commitment, if a pledge that has been signed, that has been upheld, and then it would just turn around and say no, and trying to whatever way to reinterpret or re-explain what kind of commitment from the United States one can take it seriously. So State Councilor Wang Ying made it very clear, even though I think this is a move or this is a step made by some politicians in the United States. And it is a stake. The stakes are huge for the United States as a nation, for Biden administration as a government to come out and speak up. It is not the right way to say China should not overreact. It is not the right way, the good diplomacy, to shift the blame on China, as our panelists said, that like schoolboy. We're not school boys from high school. We're not pupils. We're talking about nations. We're talking about United States as the largest, the sole superpower in this world. So commitment, credibility are at stakes.
Yeah, Einar, I mean, this is not the first time that Washington has pulled off such tricks of double dealing, of promising one thing and ending up doing another, right?
Well, you have the Kyoto Accord, you have the Paris Accord, the environmental agreements, you have the JCPOA, you have the International Criminal Court. The U.S. does not recognize the jurisdiction. You have the UN Convention of Laws of the Seas, which the U.S. seeks to enforce but is not a signatory to. It goes on and on. You can talk about the illegal actions in Iraq, throughout the Middle East, fermenting revolution in South America and in Africa. The issue, though, is that you cannot have international relations unless there is credibility and trust. And at this juncture, when you have two major powers like this and there's no trust, there has to be some sort of recognition of that. And that's why I think the U.S. Has perhaps overstepped. I don't think they understand what the economic consequences would be if China does, in fact, withdraw a number of its consulates and put a tariff on American goods flowing from China to America.
Einar, many of our friends in the West reminded us of the fact that there's separation of power in the United States. Nancy Pelosi comes from the U.S. Congress, and Joe Biden does not necessarily have full control of Nancy Pelosi's intent and will and her itinerary. What do you make of that assertion?
Well, it's true. I mean, there's separate but equal branches. It seems to be now completely politicized with the Supreme Court going back on previous rulings. This goes against stare decisis. This is the idea that once you set a precedent, you follow it. And in terms of Nancy Pelosi, yes, she could have gone as an individual. There's nothing that the U.S. can do if she boards an airplane and flies to Taiwan. But the fact that she's flying on a U.S. Commissioned, jet and is being accompanied by U.S. fighters, that they're moving aircraft carriers in there, it says that, yes, this is being officially backed.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me, a Washington correspondent of 8 years, as interesting because, when Joe Biden needed Nancy Pelosi's help, needed the help of the House Democrats to pass bills such as Build Back Better World or on abortion or on gun control, Nancy Pelosi is his best buddy, right? His ally. And then when Nancy Pelosi decided to visit Taiwan and Biden says, look, it's her own decision, which is really interesting.
Yeah, but Wang Guan, you have to remember, she's 82 years old. This was supposed to be her crowning moment. She was somebody that she's worked with for 50 years, who was supposed to help her bring home an agenda. And that hasn't happened. He's been unable for various reasons. It's not clear what his strategy is. He wants to pass bills, but they're not very well thought out, kind of like his international meetings, whether it's with ASEAN or of the Americas and things like this, not well thought out, and no details to them. So she finds herself in a very awkward position. She's about to be dethroned. All right. In a few months, there's going to be an election. The chances of her remaining as Speaker of the House are slim and none. So this is merely grandstanding. In Washington, D.C., they have no answers for the misery of the American people. 63% of the American people even earning $200,000 100,000 and 100,000 live paycheck to paycheck, with 9.1% inflation, 5.1% increase in real wages. They're losing 4% a month. So at this juncture, things are very serious. Rather than deal with them, though, what they've done is they've created a diversion, send Nancy over to Taiwan, get people stirred up. But I think it's going to backfire in the end.
Well, gentlemen, I want to move on and talk about the motives behind Nancy Pelosi's possible trip to Taipei. We'll see if it happens in 15 minutes. Dr. Rong Ying, according to 538, that is a U.S. polling website, the Democrats only had a 17% chance of retaining the House in the upcoming midterm elections. What do you think is behind Nancy Pelosi's trip? I mean, why does she want to do that? What does she want to achieve?
Yeah, there are a lot of sort of speculations and reinterpretations of the very purpose of Nancy Pelosi, why she's doing and how much and how she's going to benefit from that. One of the explanations, I think, it was that she wanted to leave some legacy, and the legacy that is because she's retiring and she's coming to the end of her political life. And Nancy Pelosi has been very much notorious for anti-China on the question of almost everything, from human rights issues, from Tibet, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and others. And Taiwan is, again, a card that she can play with. But the problem is that she's playing with fire, and she's playing on this question or this card at the expenses of the taxpayers' money of the United States, at the cost of the stability and the peace in the region, as a cost or the risking bringing the two major powers into conflict. So I think these are very serious issues, and really, I think, an issue that cause concerns for the United States.
Yeah, I mean, many experts pointed to the fact that what good is a visit if the visit alienates people from all sides, and what good is a visit if it escalates tensions between Beijing and Washington, two nuclear-powered nations, two strongest powers, arguably, in the world. I want to bring in our other guest, Joanna Lei, who I was talking to earlier today. She was a former legislator in Taipei, and she really described another factor that's often been overlooked behind Nancy Pelosi's visit. Let's take a listen.
Toward the end of the year, there will be a so-called democracy summit. And if Nancy Pelosi's visit is responded by very strong military reaction, then Tsai Ing-wen certainly will gain a very prominent position in that international summit as a protector of democracy, as a protector of U.S. ally and what they call a value partnership.
Yeah, according to flight tracking apps and websites, Nancy Pelosi, the U.S. Speaker of the House's aircraft is heading to Taipei, and according to Taipei police, her airplane will touch down in Taipei Songshan Airport in about 12 minutes, 10 p.m. local time, which is also 10 p.m. Beijing time. I mean, Einar, what would be the long-term repercussions when it comes to the relations across the Taiwan Straits, also between Beijing and Washington, after Nancy Pelosi's visit?
Well, nothing good. Beijing is going to take action. We'll have to see whether it's diplomatic, military, or economic. It will leave things in an even more sour mood than is already there. It's certainly not going to help. If China does take economic actions, it's going to add to inflation for the United States. It's going to possibly impact the gridlock that is involved in logistics. There's just nothing good that's going to come out of this. I do agree that, if you study Nancy Pelosi's history, she came from a political family. Her father was the mayor of Baltimore, Maryland, just north of the Capitol. It's, when you're dealing in Eastern politics, it's very much about organization, being tough, doing favors for people, and also punishing those who go against you. She's been a very successful Speaker of the House in the sense of keeping order, but she has not been able to get her agenda through. I do agree with my colleague that this is perhaps an opportunity for her to depart on some note that she thinks is positive, even though it's not.
Well, Dr. Rong Ying, what do you think? What would be the long-term repercussions for relations between Beijing and Washington? What kind of damages will be done?
Well, I think the Chinese side has made it very clear repeatedly that making enemy against the Chinese people is not going to end well, and there will be consequences. And the consequences is definitely going to cost much to Nancy Pelosi, to cost those who supported this visit, and unfortunately, the costs is also going to be borne, unfortunately, by the region because the tensions, because of the risk, and because of crisis may, in the end, undermine the efforts by the two sides, United States and China and the United States, to bring the relationship back to the right track for the sake of peace and stability of the region. And this is very unfortunate. I think the Chinese side made it very clear it does not want to see that happen, but it is going to happen. If it happens, and unfortunately, we're going to see the relationship going bad before turning around.
I mean, is there a way potentially to salvage this relationship? Sorry to be futuristic, but presumably there will be damages done to relations. To borrow the words of Chinese State Councilor Wang Yi, it is a political betrayal on the part of Washington towards Beijing. What do you think will happen next?
Well, the relationship is going to suffer. I think the politically certainly, economically, I believe, and also I think the cooperations and the collaborations, which so much needed for addressing, managing the challenges for the region in the and beyond. This is for
Einar, sorry, Dr. Rong Ying, I think we're losing you. Einar, so many people are talking about the turmoil in the financial market on the news of a potential visit by the U.S. Speaker of the House to Taiwan. What do you think would be the economic and financial repercussions, not only this week, but going forward?
Well, a lot depends on what China does. If they do take out the economic cards, if they make it more difficult for American businesses to do business in China, you're going to see a very sharp decline in the markets there, not only in the U.S., but around the world. This lessens people's certainty about what's happening at a time when people have very little certainty. So it's there's just nothing you can say. But one of the things that people should who are listening should understand is that if you talk to the Chinese people in the street tonight about what they feel about it, they're much more hawkish than the government itself. They feel very strongly that Taiwan should not be removed, that foreign powers should not be coming in. They still remember the 100 years of humiliation of foreign powers, China colonial powers coming in and seizing parts of China, including Hong Kong. And they don't like it. They do not expect China to bow down to anybody. So this idea that this is just merely Beijing talking is nonsense. The people of China have spoken very clearly. They're urging their government to take very strong action. So this is getting increasingly more serious.
We have about 1 minute left. Dr. Rong Ying, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think certainly the Chinese people, the Chinese government would have to respond. But that response would be very unfortunate. But we have to do something to make sure to tell the United States, to tell some people in the United States that Chinese people the days that the Chinese people have been bullied, humiliated are long gone.
All right, Vice President Rong Ying, thank you very much, and Einar Tangen, thank you as always. That will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. Our special coverage continues. Bye and take care.